Giant dinosaurs buried for tens of millions of years, mammoths hidden under wine cellars, and Ice Age giants accidentally uncovered under highways. These are giant bones archaeologists did not expect to find. Do you ever just go for a walk with your dog and, I don't know, accidentally unearth a giant dinosaur bone? No? Well, it happened to this guy. In May of 2022 in southern France, a 25-year-old amateur fossil hunter named Damien Boschetto was out with his dog and noticed something weird sticking out of a freshly collapsed cliff face. It did not look like a rock. Once the pros were called in, they realized this was a 70-million-year-old dinosaur skeleton belonging to a Titanosaur, one of the enormous long-necked herbivores that once roamed the planet. And it was relatively complete. About 70% of the skeleton was found, which is incredibly rare for titanosaurs in Europe. Most we know of are just fragments. At around 30 feet long and preserved from head to tail in places, it gives scientists a much clearer picture of titanosaurs in that part of the world than they ever had before. Excavation was slow, and the whole site was kept under wraps for a couple years to protect it from looters, but Damien's dog walk turned into one of the most exciting dinosaur finds in Europe in decades, and the fossil is now set to go on display at the museum so that the public can see it too. In December 1990 in Norfolk, England, two local fossil hunters, Margaret and Harold Hems, noticed this huge bone peeking out the base of the cliffs on West Runton Beach. What they found turned out to be the beginning of the largest and most complete mammoth skeleton ever found in the UK, a steppe mammoth, a prehistoric relative of the woolly mammoth that lived somewhere between 866,000 and 478,000 years ago. And over the next few years, a series of excavations led by the Norfolk Archaeological Unit dug up an astonishing amount of this animal's remains, about 85% of the whole skeleton. We're talking legs, tusks, skull, backbone, huge parts of the skeleton that let scientists reconstruct what this massive creature looked like. The mammoth stood about 133 feet at the shoulder and weighed around 10 tons, about twice as heavy as a modern African elephant. So getting this thing out of the ground was no easy task. Bones were wrapped in protective layers, encased in plaster, and lifted out with cranes. Once they were in the lab, scientists found evidence that this mammoth's carcass had been scavenged by hyenas, and that the animal had a deformed knee. It's possible that that had something to do with its death. Pieces of this mammoth are now stored and displayed in museums around Norfolk, including casts of the famous tibia you can check out at a beach cafe right near where it was found. In May 2014, fossil hunters in South Dakota's Hell Creek Formation discovered a Triceratops skeleton unlike any seen before. This one was dubbed Big John. It's officially the largest Triceratops skeleton ever found. The skeleton measures around 26 feet long, and the skull alone is over 8 feet wide, which is bonkers when you think about a 3-horned dinosaur that could literally have stood taller than your average door frame. Over 200 bones were excavated and documented, which gave scientists a super detailed picture of this thing. Some of the bones show signs of injury and wear, which tells a story, of course, about how this animal lived its life, likely in the Cretaceous, around 66 million years ago. After digging and prepping the bones for years, the Triceratops found its way into museums and even auctions, where it made headlines for selling at tens of millions of dollars. Back in 1994, a team working in rural Oklahoma dug up giant fossilized bones that at first looked more like old tree trunks than dinosaur bones. They were vertebrae, though, from one of the tallest dinosaurs ever discovered, a sauropod called Sauroposeidon. Sauroposeidon wasn't just big, it was gargantuan. The bones they found were neck vertebrae. Each one measured roughly 4.6 feet. Bigger than most people's whole torso. Paleontologists initially didn't even recognize them as dinosaur bones because of how enormous they were. Once they realized what they had, though, they estimated based on those vertebrae that the animal's neck alone was around 36 to 39 feet long, and the full body probably around 92 to 112 feet from snout to tail. When Sauroposeidon raised its head, it could reach heights of about 56 to 59 feet. Like looking into windows of a 5-story building. In 1993, amateur fossil hunter Ruben D. Carlini was exploring Patagonia in Argentina when he came across bones that turned out to belong to a dinosaur unlike anything seen before. A couple years later, scientists named the species Giganotosaurus carolini, Giganotosaurus, as the name suggested, was massive, somewhere between 40 to 43 feet long from nose to tail, and weighing several tons, with some estimates for bigger ones pushing up to 8 to 10. Its skull alone may have been around 5 to 6 feet long, filled with dozens of serrated blade-like teeth built for slicing through meat. Before this guy, Tyrannosaurus rex was often the first name people thought of when it came to giant predatory dinos, but here in Argentina, you had this huge monster stalking the plains well before T-Rex ever showed up in North America. Its bones, though incomplete, include parts of the skull, pelvis, leg bones, and most of the backbone, enough for paleontologists to build a pretty clear picture of just how intimidating this beast was. The Badlands of Wyoming are a stretch of dry, eroded land with lots of hills and gullies where rain and wind have worn away the soil. It was here that paleontologists made an unbelievable discovery: the mummified remains of two duck-billed dinosaurs called Edmontosaurus annectens. Now, when I say mummified, obviously I'm not talking about wrapped in bandages. I mean the dinosaurs' bodies were buried, fastened up that their skin, hooves, and spikes fossilized along with the bones, preserving their shape almost like a mold. This is super rare. These two dinos, nicknamed Ed Jr., the smaller one, of course, and Ed Sr., the adult, let scientists see details normally lost in fossils. You can actually make out the texture of their skin, the shape of their tails, and even the strange hoof-like tips on their feet, something no one expected on a dinosaur. They probably died during a drought and were buried quickly by floods, leaving their bodies preserved in clay. Dinosaur National Monument sits on the border of Colorado and Utah. It's a rugged desert with orange rocks, canyons, and cliffs, a place where, over 100 years ago, paleontologists first dug up dinosaurs. In 2025, construction crews were just fixing up a parking area. They came across huge dinosaur bones in the sandstone beneath the asphalt. These bones belong to a long-necked dinosaur, something like a diplodocus, similar to the ones that show up in Jurassic Park. Some of these bones weighed hundreds of pounds and have been buried for around 150 million years, but nobody had been expecting to find anything like this because the site had already been dug over in the early 1900s. People thought all the big bones had already been found, but here they were lying under a parking lot. In Gobelsburg, Austria, a winemaker named Andreas Kernerstofer was renovating his wine cellar when he came across something massive buried in the ground. At first he thought it was just some old bits of construction debris, but it turned out to be hundreds of bones from at least 3 woolly mammoths. The bones were stacked in layers. Archaeologists also found stone tools and charcoal nearby, meaning humans may have interacted with these animals, hunting and butchering them. Excavating the bones was tricky because they were embedded in the cellar floor. Teams had to carefully dig them out and transport them to labs to be studied. In Lubbock, Texas, crews working on a new highway came across something way older than asphalt: massive fossilized bones of Ice Age megafauna, which is just a fancy way of saying these were some giant animal bones from stuff like ancient ground sloths that could stand up to 9 feet tall, and possibly mammoths and mastodons. The discovery wasn't just a few scattered bones. Archaeologists found multiple large skeleton pieces embedded in sediment, giving a clear sense of how massive these animals were. Some bones were bigger than most humans, with leg bones like tree trunks. In 1872, in Wyoming, a group of fossil hunters digging for shells got a lot more than they were bargaining for: huge dinosaur bones, including hip bones, ribs, and vertebrae. Clearly, this had been a massive creature, unlike anything known at the time. Edward Drinker Cope, a paleontologist studying the bones, named it Agathaumas sylvestris, which basically means marvelous forest dweller. Agathaumas was a ceratopsian, a group of dinosaurs with big skulls and horns, kind of like Triceratops. Its bones were enormous. The pelvis alone could easily dwarf a human. Even though there were only fragments left, these bones showed paleontologists that giant dinosaurs had been roaming North America far earlier than most people realized. That has been the video for today. I'll catch you, yes you specifically, next time.